I guess we're gonna have to make some lemonade out of lemons. Okay, so disclaimer, I am not going to be explaining what a DAW is. I'm not going to be explaining music theory. I'm not going to teach you how to use your DAW. This is just a video of me making a remake or a remaster, or I guess what some people could call a restoration of a Chrono Trigger song. So I'm in the middle of working on my Synthetic Origins Chrono Trigger Radical Dreamers album, and I noticed that one of my files went missing. I actually did this on live stream with a bunch of my YouTube followers, and I'm shocked actually that I didn't save the file. Or if I did save the file, what I think ended up happening was that it was saving as a general MIDI file and I lost the project. So I mean, I can cry about it, or I can use this as an opportunity to show you how I do my remasters off of live stream. It's just gonna be me showing you what I do to make these remasters. Let's get to it. Should I cut? Gee, with the amount of experience I have making YouTube videos, you'd think I'd be a little bit less nervous here. We're going to start off by downloading a program called VGM Trans. So VGM Trans is a program that you use to rip sequences from the video game music. So you can do it from the Super Nintendo, DS. As long as VGM Trans has a driver for it, it'll work. So I haven't updated mine, so I'll just perfect opportunity to show you how to download it. Search up VGM Trans on GitHub. Should be the first link. That's the one I clicked. I'm using Windows, so I'm going to download the Windows build, and this build looks like it went through last month. So we've got a latest build right here. There we go. Scroll down a bit and find the Windows version, and you just click this. Make sure you're signed into GitHub, otherwise these will not be clickable. So yes, you will need a GitHub account. But you can go ahead and click this VGM Trans link right here, which will start the download. Woohoo! We'll click it. I use WinRAR to download stuff. I don't know why it's zipped, so we got a zip within a zip, but whatever. Let's do it again. Then we'll go to bin, which stands for binary, and here are all the files rather. We'll select all. Extract to the folder where you know it's going to be. I'm going to put this in VGM Trans new. I'm going to overwrite everything I have. Boom. Great. We got VGM Trans now. Now I'm going to run it. VGM Trans. And time now. Wait, load. Phew. Sorry, I thought it was going to crash. Older versions of VGM Trans crashed for me like crazy. This new one looks really good though. Anyways, so we're going to go to our folder with, oh, by the way, you need to download the Chrono Trigger, not just Chrono Trigger, but any SPC files or whatever you're trying to rip. I'm going to go to my Chrono Trigger folder, music, work, SPC, CT. And the song that is not working is called A Shot of Darkness. So that's the one I'm going to try to rip. So after I click it, there it is. We'll play it just to make sure I got the right one. So it did. So what we do is right click on it and then we export. Doesn't matter which one you choose. I don't use the DLS or SF2 files unless I'm showing what I'm doing. But we now extract the MIDI file. So we're going to select the folder where the MIDI file goes. Boom. Doesn't say it did anything, but it actually just did the work. It extracted the MIDI file. So now we're going to open up our DAW. This DAW that I'm using is Cakewalk. I use it because it's completely free. Well, 90% free, I guess, if you consider having to create a BandLab account free or not. I never use the social messaging or can't even speak. I don't use the social part of it. I just use it for the cakewalks. I have my qualms about it, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. So we're going to load up a shot of darkness.mid. Okay, there we go. So this looks like it's going to be fairly straightforward. There's only minimal volume changes. Let me go through this a little bit with you just so that you know what's going on. So the way that a cow driver works on for Square games, Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, anything like that, it doesn't register things as velocity, which you would normally use in MIDI. Now, the reason for that is because that's not how Super Nintendo sound works. Super Nintendo volume works that it's got a left channel and a right channel, and the left and the right channel changed values so that you can either pan left or pan right. There's only one volume setting, so if you got like channel fade outs that aren't using the ADSR, then through software, those two volume channels will diminish in volume to do a fade out. Now, it also uses those two values for velocity. Now, the problem with that is the Super Nintendo has a really, really, really low dynamic range. What that means is if you have a song that has a very slow fade in, kind of like the Final Fantasy VII intro, you're going to hear some stepping. Now, what's stepping? Imagine stepping as being the audible equivalent of when you're doing a gradient shade from black to white in an image editor. Unless your color bitrate is high, you're going to see the individual colors it takes to go from black to white. So that could be, what, 16 shades in some cases? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Same thing in audio. If you've got a low dynamic range, in most Super Nintendo games, the musicians were pretty smart and they got around that by, just not composing things that depended on a lot of dynamic range. For the most part, we don't have to worry about that here. However, we will have to worry about converting these volume commands into something that doesn't change the volume controller. So that's controller 7. And the reason is because I want to use that as a master volume. So what I would like personally in the future is if VGM Trans, they can actually start using CC11 for the volume changes instead of CC7, because CC7 is supposed to be main volume. CC11 is expression, and it's supposed to be like the second level of volume changes. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do, I could actually use those sound fonts to kind of hear what this sounds like, just like I did, like how I played it back in VGM Trans here. But what I also want to do is I'm going to load up ChipSynth SFC. You don't have to use ChipSynth SFC for this, but what you can do is just like use any SPC player if you want to, keep track of what's what. I am going to use ChipSynth SFC just because I'm used to it. Okay, so we've got a shot of Crisis right here. Perfect. So I'm going to use that as a reference. So let's just hear what's on channel 1. Shut off the echo. We got percussive organ. Second percussive organ. It's in the middle too. Third percussive organ. Interesting. So they vibrate and they're also not playing at the same volume. So channel 1 is going to have the higher velocity. Channel 2 is going to have the middle velocity, and channel 3 is going to have the lower velocity. Okay, so this is going to be fun. Let's do this for now. I am going to move this clip here to another track. First, second of all, I'm going to remove a lot of the... VGM Trans actually translates a lot of the controllers that I personally don't use. You can use them if you want. I just find they're way too hard to work with and change things if I need to change things. Okay. So we're going to do all this and remove all the controller information. I already have an idea of what's going to be on them. You can see the lines disappeared, which means there's no controller data. Call you Perc Organ 1. perc organ 2, perc organ 3. You can also see that there's a bit of an echo here. So that's fine. Let's make sure all those 3 channels are also the same volume. They're not, so let's just center them. They're kind of showing the different volumes with them, which is totally fine, but what I'm doing is I'm converting everything to velocity. Now, what I normally do is I load up my contact, usually use contact 5 in case I need to load up a patch. Contact 5 is the last version of contact that can import other file formats other than contact. What that basically means is you will not be able to import any patches or any instrumentation from CD sample libraries using Contact 6, which is the latest version. So let's load up the samples for them. Now I'm using the percussion organ from the Akai library. I usually put copies of my patches into one folder so I can find them all. Let's see, CT instrumentation, or instruments I should say. Akai, perc organ. Oh, I got one for shot already. Nice. That means I don't have to modify them. And by modify, I mean like I don't have to change the patch to use the vibrato like the game version of the song uses. As far as I can understand, I think these already have the vibrato in them, which they do, because you can see right there. Yeah, so you can hear it. Okay, I'm going to play back. You're going to hear general MIDI representations of them. But that's not the sound that I made. The reason is because in Cakewalk, and I believe other DAWs and other sequencers, you actually have to assign these to the VSTI. So the VSTI in this case is contact. You have to assign them to the plugin, otherwise they're not going to have any sound. Channel 1 is channel 1 in here. See, this shows 1, 2, 3, which means I should get the sound now. And they're really super quiet. That's going to change when I do some final mixing. The reason is because I'm going to use some mixing plugins to bring the volume back up. Now, this is easy. I can either select the clips I want, go to process, and then transpose them. Or if I want to keep some things, non-destructive, then I can, I guess it's destructive. I don't know. But you can always just go into the column on the left, just go key plus 12. So that's going to push it up an octave. So right then and there, we already have 3 of the 8 channels done. The next one, that's the bass. So this is the bass line right here. I'm going to call you a pick bass. However, I'm not going to keep this track because I'm going to make another instance of contact. And I'm going to use, like that there, pick bass. I'm going to use the bass sample that I normally use for Chrono Trigger, which I believe is elec bass nor. Don't have sound. Why is that? Well, just like the other channels here, this, even though the MIDI notes are on the same channel of contact, it's not assigned to the correct channel in the track itself. So I go to the MIDI tab on the left here, and then I choose channel 1, and now I should hear sound. Of course, I'm an octave too high. Let's tone that down by 12 semitones. And it's pretty loud too. So the other thing about contact is it tends to save the patches with a volume that was controlled by the last song that it was using when you save the patch, which is really annoying. So sometimes you have to reinitialize the volume by just clicking on the channel. In this case, it made it way too loud. So let's just lower that. Yeah, that's good. Perfect. Okay. Now I'm going to get rid of this track. Don't need it anymore. No, it's channel 4. That's strings. Now this is where things get a little tricky. I don't know if you can tell on this, but this track uses a lot of legato. What's legato? In the olden days, if you played a keyboard, one note, and then you played the next note while holding the first note, and you were using something called a monophonic synthesizer, what it would do is take the pitch and then bend it to the next note automatically. If you had portamento set, then it would actually slide the pitch slowly. But in this case, what Mr. Mitsuda is doing is he's playing the notes really fast, going to the next note in legato. So this is technically one long note that's just changing pitch, as you can see right here. So that's actually super simple to figure out in Kontakt, because Kontakt has a script that lets you do that. So we'll do this again. We'll insert another instrument. We'll make sure it's Kontakt 5. I'll drag the track over. That's a big volume change right there. We'll have to see what that is. So I just dragged the notation, the clip notation onto the track. And again, well, first of all, let's figure out what I'm doing. So I'm going to turn this to strings. I believe there's a part in the song that actually has 2 string notes playing at the same time. We'll have to double check that. But first of all, let's get the strings going here. So I have a preset made called CT strings. I'm going to give up my secret only because I'm almost done the Synthetic Origins album. Chrono Trigger strings eluded me forever. It eluded everybody else. Let me tell you how it's made. So this is Chrono Trigger strings. I'm going to recreate it for you right now. So if you're familiar with the EMU Emulator 3 strings patch, you will, especially if you're familiar with Final Fantasy VIII's music, you will know what these samples sound like. So you might recognize those sounds. Now, the Chrono Trigger string comes from this bank. Can't really hear it out of these sounds because of 2 things. Now, let's get the strings going here again. So the Chrono Trigger strings, if you look at the sample, cuts the attack of the sound off very quickly. So these are strings that are sampled midway through a sound. Okay, that's clue number 1. Now, if you also listen to the sound, you'll hear that the sample sounds like it's a very high-pitched note, doesn't it? So that's clue number 2. So it's definitely not one of these ones. But it could be one of these ones. Now that kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? What would happen if we go into the instrument, we take all the maps. Now I know exactly which sample it is. It's actually F sharp 5. What would happen if we took all these, deleted them, and we took this, and then stretched it down? Now it doesn't sound like Chrono Trigger strings, does it? But what if we go into the sound and we start the sound after that slow attack? So like if we go here, you'll see that it starts off on a very big ridge. So what if we take this, the start of the sample, and we start it at this first big ridge? Ah, it's starting to sound familiar, doesn't it? We play C here. Play C here. Now, there's also another thing you need to do. Because this is a very high-pitched sound, and because that's a very low-pitched note, what you want to do is change the quality of the interpolation to perfect, which is going to get rid of the aliasing. And then what else you want to do is give it a little bit of an attack. Now in this song doesn't have an attack as far as I know, but typically you'd want to, I have a list of the attacks and everything that Super Nintendo supports. The SPC player in ChipSynth SFC tells you what attack it is. Yeah, so if you see it, it's F770, which means F is the highest attack speed. So what that basically means is like this sample in this song doesn't have an attack, but it might actually have it later in the song. Let's find out. Okay, so here. Nope, everything's still F. But again, if you listen to this, quick attack. We have our Chrono Trigger strings now. Okay, now that I showed you how to make Chrono Trigger strings, let's delete these. The only reason is because I have a patch made with it already, and I would rather just use that because it's already got everything I need set up. So because of that instrument having legato on it, what you do is you go to preset in the scripting area, go to factory, go to performance, and then go to unison portamento. And then this will pop up. You need to change your mono mode to legato. And what that basically means is if you're going to be playing more than one note here, it's going to slide the pitch from the first note to the second note. We have to assign our channel, don't we? That's already sounding pretty good, but we got to get rid of that attack. Now, I don't want to start with no attack because unlike the Super Nintendo sample, this one will click. The Super Nintendo one will click too, but if you notice this sample itself starts off at 0 and then goes in. So it's kind of like the declicking or the fade in is hard-coded into the sample. I mean, we could technically do that here. It's a lot of work. No reason to do it when we have the attack. So we'll just set the attack to like, I don't know, 5 milliseconds, and that should get rid of the click. Good. Good. Now we're going to change the key up an octave. Good. Now we're going to go into the notation and select all the notes that are before this last one because I want everything to portamento instead of this. Okay, looks good. Then what I'm going to do is extend all the notes just slightly so that they overlap. And now when I play it, you should hear the exact same effect. What happened there? Okay, so here's a little bit of a little glitch that actually happens sometimes in MIDI. You can't have the same note overlapping itself on most MIDI devices, or it's going to cut the note out. So Contact is actually cutting this note out when it should actually just be one long note. What I'm going to do is get rid of the second note and then extend the first one so that it goes like that. The reason is because on the Super Nintendo, in the Square music driver, this note and this note will exist, but because legato's on, it's just going to be one long note. So again, because of the way this Contact plays notation back, easy to fix, but you do have to do some modifications. Now, I'm not sure if this should be shortened. I guess it doesn't really matter because it does have a quick attack, but let's just shorten it. Should happen here too? Yeah. We'll delete, extend. Okay. So we're on the bridge of the song. Now I'm wondering where those extra notes, I know that that part of the song has 2 string notes playing in a chord. So you can hear how it extended there. So that means that the notes that we're playing here, actually that's them right here, isn't it? Should have another track. So let's make another MIDI track. Actually, let's do it this way. We'll make 2 MIDI tracks. Make 1 strings 1. We'll make 2 strings 2. Drag you above the strings track here. We'll move you up here. Move you below here. Strings, nope, that's wrong. Move strings 2 here, then move strings 1 here. Can't even speak. It's all good. Okay, now let's save this patch. And the reason is because then I can just load it again. And when it loads again, it loads into channel 2 automatically. So channel 1 will assign to channel 1. Channel 2 will assign to channel 2. I'll select both. and then I'll hold Control, change the 2 contact 5-3, which is the third instance of contact 5. Boom. Now both of these should play. Okay, so I have to change their key by 12 semitones. This is the mistake I made before. Let us go to File, Save As, Normal. Do not save it as MIDI. Save it as normal. Because if you save it as MIDI, it's going to lose all the presets and all the instrumentation and everything like that. We'll click Save. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing. I want to get rid of the controller information here, but I do want to change a few things. I'm pretty sure this one. You hear how that's one note, one note, one note, one note? I believe that's the crash cymbal. So let us move this to its own track, and I'm going to choose both these. I'm going to bounce to clips. Bouncing basically takes multiple clips and automatically merges them. I'm pretty sure these notes are a little bit lower in volume than the beginning, so let's double check that. So the high notes, channel 5, are playing UD, UE, which is just off center to the right just slightly. And the other note I believe was playing on channel 3. So let's watch channel 3's volume. Okay, so if you can see, it's actually... I think my order of notation in the clips are a little bit off, but I can fix that. You could see channel 3 is using OBOC, so it's a little bit quieter. And channel 5 is even quieter than that. So I'm going to move you down, move you up, because I want the notation to be consistent. I've just deviated off of the Super Nintendo structure, but that's okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is change this velocity. Lower you, something like that. Now, it might not be audible to the ear, but it's integral to the mix. Do the same thing on the second track. We're going to go a little bit lower than that. Good. Done with this channel, so we'll delete it. We're on channel 6 now. So you can hear that it's kind of going back and forth. That sounds like the kick in the snare drum. Kick, 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 snare, kick, 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 snare, kick, 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 snare, kick, 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 snare. So what I like to do with these ones is I like to make 2 tracks. Just doing this right now to separate them, but if you go into this track, which we'll call kick, not lick, kick. Lick is a little bit too risque for this video. We'll call you snare. We're going to choose all the kick drums just by clicking on the note. And let me go change my snap to, okay, we'll change it to 1/8. Yeah, 1/8. Okay, we'll choose this one, which is the snare. Control X. We're going to highlight this part of the timeline. We're going to go to the snare track and then paste it. So the notation is now separated. So this is going to be all kicks. This is all going to be snares. Same thing. Let's open up contact 5, but we're going to make 2 instances, one for the kick, one for the snare. So you might be wondering why I'm doing it this way. It's because when you're normally mixing drums, you want to have each drum onto its own track. It just makes it better for mixing. Gives you more control. So just to keep everything a little bit more, you know, consistent, let's call it kick. I'm going to load the Chrono Trigger source kick, which comes from the Akai library. Was it the Akai library? I believe it was either the Akai library or it was the Akai CD3000 library. It's one of those. The CD3000 is basically the main Akai library. It's just got only a few select sounds, though it also seems to have a couple sounds that the main library doesn't have, which is weird. But, and this is one of those sounds, by the way, but that's okay. So we got the Chrono Trigger kick there. Same difference. We got to drag the notes to the kick track. And then we have to assign the MIDI channel to 1, and we're still not going to hear anything unless we change the notation to play back where the kick drum is actually programmed, which is C. Not that C, not that C, that C. C3. Yo. Perfect. Okay, same thing with the snare. Gonna make a new track, contact, snare, drag the snare notation up, load the patch. In this case, the patch comes from multiple sources. All of them are Roland. So it doesn't matter where you get it from. I think I got it from the Roland rhythm section. So this one I'll just load up. So I actually got it from the SNR Rock Snare 15 patch. There's that sound that we know so well. Very unlikely that this note is the same one. Yeah, I think they're actually programmed to be like general MIDI snare programs, just like the kick drum. Be on a D, wouldn't it? Oh, forgot to assign my channel. There we go. There we go. Okay, so we've got the snare. Let's solo the kick and the snare and just hear how it sounds. It's sounding pretty good. Let's solo everything we have so far and just hear what we have. Sounding pretty good. I would say we're done the kick and the snare, but you always want to go through just to see if like Mitsuda throws in like tom drums or something. Looks okay. I always try to save the percussion to be the last. So in this case, I don't think these are hi-hats. Yeah, those are percussion sounds. So let's go ahead and we'll do the hi-hats and the crash first, and then we'll do the percussion sounds after. I'm going to assign the hi-hats to its own audio track. I don't mind if I mix the opened hi-hat and the closed hi-hat with the same thing, because there's not going to be a lot of deviation between them, and you want to kind of mix those together the same for consistency's sake. So we'll call this one hi-hat closed. Another way you can do it is you could just duplicate. So right click and duplicate the track and then tell it you want all the events in it as well. Do not link to the original, otherwise any changes you make in the second clip track will affect the first one. We'll click OK. This one I'm actually gonna show you a trick. There's too many to change, especially on video. So I'm just going to keep the volumes there, but let's go ahead and we'll start the timeline at measure 2. We'll highlight the opened hi-hat right there. Control X. You don't need it. And then on this one, call it hi-hat opened. Do the same thing except for the opposite notes. So we'll choose the closed hi-hats. Either Control X or just delete it. Either way, doesn't matter. So now we have all the closed hi-hats on this track and all the open ones on this. Insert instrument, contact 5. All you hi-hats. You're wondering where the hi-hats come from for Chrono Trigger. They come from Bob Clear Mountain's drums. I think it's on disc 2, and I think it's dry kit 14 or dry kit 4. It's one of the two. Find out in a second. I save the patch here. Yeah. 4 meg kit 4. So it's going to be, I have a closed hi-hat patch, but I never use it. I'm going to use this one here, and you can hear the hi-hats right here. Those are Chrono Trigger's hi-hats. Okay, so let's go to change. I kind of made a mistake here, didn't I? Let's change this back to hi-hat closed, hi-hat open. And I'm going to change this to general MIDI 1. I made a little bit of a mistake, so I'm going to actually change this. We'll call that perk. I accidentally, off camera actually, I assigned the percussion line to a hi-hat line and it kind of broke everything. But as you can see, things are a little bit backwards. So let's call you hi-hat opened. You're going to be hi-hat closed. I'm going to drag you up and then channel 1. No, sorry, channel 1 again. Because even though they're two separate tracks, they're still going to affect the hi-hat, the same hi-hat instrument. Okay, so the regular hi-hats work. Open hi-hats are on the wrong note. Helps if I reassign it. There we go. There we go. Mitsuda did a lot of processing on the hi-hats, so to replicate it, basically, I like to make the opened hi-hat the loudest it can go. Get rid of the expression here. I don't want this channel to screw up the other volumes and stuff. We got CC91. CC91 is usually used to trigger reverb, but I'm going to be using reverb through a separate plugin, so I just deleted the controller. Okay, good. Now, what I want to do is select all of these, delete all the controller information except notation. And on this one, this is what I was talking about earlier. What I'm going to do is take the main volume, select all of the volume commands, and then go to expression, delete this, whoops, delete this, to do it again because it unselected everything. Go to expression, right click on it, and then move all the values here. So now all those volume commands are now being assigned to controller 11. What that means is now in the instrument, I can go to hi-hats, modify the instrument, change the amplifier, velocity. Well, it doesn't matter if I change it. All the velocity on all the notes are the same. I'm going to leave it there so that it's a little bit louder. And what I'll do is I'll add a modulator, external source MIDI CC, and we'll set it to 11, then 127. What that basically tells Contact is that, hey, I got volume commands on channel 11. I want you to affect the volume. So now when I play, you can barely hear it, but it's there. So you can actually modify the sensitivity by clicking this button and clicking active. And I'm just going to lower the range a bit. And as you can hear, Contact's not super fast. It's either that or Cakewalk's not using it correctly. But what I usually do to compensate for that is I'll select all the volume commands and then just basically zoom in as much as I can. Well, let's change the quantization to, I don't know, 2. And then I'll just move everything over just before the note starts. You want to hold shift while you're doing this. That way you don't affect the volume. Because if you don't, then you can change the volume like that. Holding shift snaps it to the same volume. Again, you're just going to start it just before the note starts. Now we shouldn't hear any audible glitches in the volume changes. That's pretty good. I still don't like how the hi-hats, the closed hi-hats are way quieter than the open ones. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'll just select all and then lower the velocity on these. Let's mute this one. Nice. Okay, we've got a crash cymbal now. Insert instrument, contact, create. Now, full disclosure, I still haven't found Chrono Trigger's crash. I have no idea where it is. I don't know what it is. I am compensating by using a crash cymbal from the Bob Clear Mountains sample library, the same place that the hi-hats come from. And I just tried to mix it to sound somewhat similar to the Chrono Trigger crash, because Chrono Trigger usually gets most of its sounds from either EMU Emulator 3, from the Akai libraries, or from Bob Clear Mountain. My guess is it's in one of those three, but it's highly processed. If you listen to the original crash cymbal from Chrono Trigger, it's fast loop, like it's super quick. Here, I'll play it very quickly for you. You can hear how fast that is. So the crash that I'm using sounds, I don't know, I think it sounds pretty similar to it. It's not exact. My important thing was to get the same kind of flavor, get the same kind of ringing in the crash. Otherwise, like, it won't sound right. So this is the one I chose. It's got kind of the same tone to it. It almost sounds like Final Fantasy VI's crash, because Final Fantasy VI got its crash from the same library. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll move the crash cymbal here. And we need to move our notation, which I believe is going to be D. No. C sharp. Okay, so I think that part is done. Now we get to the part where I'm not looking forward to, is the percussion. It's not hard. I just find it super tedious. Every percussion track in Chrono Trigger, whether it's like Corridors of Time or whether it's like Shala's theme. Oh my god, Specchio was a nightmare. It's tedious. You got to go hunting for the sound. You have to know which note the sound is playing from. You're not sure which sound it is, so you use the closest thing you can. 9 times out of 10, it's wrong. Well, that's not true. Sometimes it's right. But just like the crash cymbal, I could not find the percussion samples like the conga. So I started using the closest thing that I could find. There was a conga sample in, I believe it was the Akai library. Oh, no. It was actually the Fairlight library, Fairlight CMI3. So I'm using that conga sample. And the opened conga sound, I'm actually stealing from Final Fantasy VII. I mean, technically, it's a higher quality version of the exact same sound. So that's the sound I'm using. It doesn't seem too hard. It's just like the same sounds. We'll have to remember those tones. I'll come back to that in a second. I'll duplicate this twice. So right click and duplicate track, events, repetitions twice. Should get 2 more tracks with it. Good. I'm going to call you Conga 1, Conga 2, Conga 3. I guess we'll just call you Conga opened. Okay, so Conga 1 will go do, 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 do. Conga 1 is going to be that, so let's choose these two, delete them. Conga 2 is going to be delete that, Conga opened, so we're going to go here, delete this. Again, you were hearing the hi-hats because earlier I had accidentally assigned this to the hi-hat contact. I'm going to insert contact. Let's call you congas. Channel 1, channel 2, channel 3. Should be easy enough. Volume should all be the same. I'm just going to double check something very quick. I have a sneaking suspicion. Oh yeah. Okay, so there is a lot of volume changes for this. I'll load the conga track. It was conga 05. Yep. Load Congo 5 again. I think it was only those 1 notes that were changing in volume, so I might be able to get away with this. Yeah, if you look at these notes, they're all the same volume. Just keep going and double check. Yeah, this line doesn't change at all through the entire song. Okay, so this one I can kind of cheat. We'll edit, select by filter, nothing, delete everything except the notes. Good. Now you should be the same. Yeah, so same thing. Let's choose everything on this track except the notation. Let's hit that delete key. Good. I did not load the third conga sample, so let's do that really quick. Load. And you would have seen the FF7 one when I typed it in conga FF7. Not bad. Of course, the pitches are all wrong, but that's easy to fix. So this one's, you like how I tune things? I sing conga 1. Conga 2. Conga 3, which is conga opened. I think that sounds like the right pitch. A little bit too high. Do 2.5. Sounds good. And now when I play this, it should be okay. Now the only thing is, like, it's a little bit faster and I got too much of a release on it, that's why. So let's change that to 50. Same here. This is probably, yeah, changing to 50. And the first one, we'll do the same thing. So we're going to select mod, change the modulator. Oh, that's pitch. Select mod, we'll change the add modulator. We're going to go to external sources, MIDI CC, and then 11, max of 127, or default of 127, I should say. And then, of course, we forgot to change one thing, so select all. I got to delete this first. Did it again. Controller 7, select all. Then go to controller 11, right click and move. Boom. Get rid of the reverb. We don't need that. Good. Now I'm just going to change the sensitivity. Sounds about right. But the same thing, we select everything. And we're just going to move the start of the stuff just before. Select all and move just, there we go. All right, let's try a full playthrough without the mixing for now. Let's just hear how it sounds. Mixing is all over the place. Perfect. Well, not perfect at all, but we're getting somewhere. At least we got most of the, if not all the instrumentation done. Now there's just a little bit of a change here. I just want to change something very slightly. I believe these notes should technically all be the same volume. Okay. Good. Okay, let's get to mixing. It's mixing time. Okay, so how I normally like to do it is I like to start the console view. Now this is the way I work. You can work however you like, but I always have like a couple tracks on the right here. I'll usually make one a reverb track. These are aux tracks and a main track. Now what I normally end up doing is I'll select all my tracks. Now I already see something that shouldn't be there. This snare track should go, so let's delete it. I'll control A and select all my tracks. Holding control, I will output all the audio stuff to the main track. Now when I play, everything should be coming out of this. Good. So again, when I was muting the main track, everything went silent, which is good. Now the other thing I always forget to do, but I need to do, is output the reverb track to the main track so that it also affects it. I got two kick drums. Yeah, this is the old MIDI track. I can delete that. So we can do this. Man, I should have optimized these tracks before I got this far, but it's okay. Right click, whoops, right click, right click, right click, right click. There's the delete track. Okay. Select all my tracks. This command's about to ignore the MIDI tracks, but all my audio tracks, I'm going to sidechain out using Ascend to the reverb track. Reason for this, no, not every single track is going to use reverb, but I like to put it into the reverb track anyways, even if it's not loud, just so that it glues the mix together. That's how I do things. You don't have to do it that way, but it's just the way I do things. I normally check the song. You can keep track of which channels have reverb or which don't. From what I can already tell, drum track doesn't have it, percussion track does, and yeah, hi-hat doesn't have reverb on it. I'm just going to speed things up to see if the crash cymbal has an echo on it. That doesn't look like it, does it? No. Although it's weird because most Final Fantasy VI tracks don't have reverb on the bass, but Mitsude does put reverb on his bass. I'm not sure why he does that. You kind of want to avoid putting reverb on your bass in most game music, mostly because like it muddies up the low end. But I guess if your mix is done well enough, then you don't really have to worry about that. So let's insert. I'm using the Slate plugins, which I pay $30 US per month to utilize, but you can use any which ones you want to use. Up to you, doesn't matter. I'm just using these because one, they got some good emulations, and two, all my other tracks are using the same plugin, so I just want to keep everything consistent. So I'll choose Verb Suite Classics. Doop-a-doo, there it goes. And what I'll do is I'll load device. FG16, which I believe is a lexicon IR, which is called an impulse response. Basically, it's just a way of capturing a frequency response of a device or a room or something, whatever, by using an IR. So I'm going to choose FG16X, late 1.8 seconds. Still too loud. I'm going to solo it. I usually like to fine tune it. Usually I'll get rid of the highs, lower the lows just a little bit. Turn the attack up just a little bit. Pre-delay. Normally I don't use that for quick songs like this because pre-delay kind of gives the reverb some more depth, but this song doesn't need that. I will, however, turn the chorus up a little bit and turn the width down a little bit. And let's lower the volume on the reverb a little bit too. It's ringing out too long. We'll turn the decay down a bit. Now, the other thing I do is I choose all the instruments or the audio tracks that are not supposed to have reverb. For example, the crash, the hi-hats, the snare, the kick. Whoops. That's a good point. You can actually like separate your tracks with colors. I don't normally do it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So I've got kick and snare, hi-hats, and crash. And while, again, holding control, I'm going to drag the volume down on it. And you know what, guys? I think I did something dumb, and I think I deleted my crash cymbal. Let's fix that really quick. We got our crash back. I'm going to save so I don't lose everything again. Now let's figure out some of the panning here. So it sounds like the percussive organ is just dead center. We'll leave the panning alone. Oh, these are bass, rather. Bass is dead center as well. Strings. Strings are dead center. Okay. Kick is center. Snare is just slightly to the right. So we'll smooth that right. Now, you'll also want to do something that Cakewalk doesn't do by default, which is annoying, but you have to pan your sends, otherwise the reverb won't act correctly. So what I normally do is I do the pan, I right click, and then I go follow track pan. And the reason for that is because any changes in the track will get sent to the bus track or whatever track on the side is going to be called. Okay, so I think the congas are panned a little bit. So conga 1 is probably middle pan. You can hear the reverb in it. Conga 2 is slightly to the right, so about 50%. Conga 3 is slightly to the left, about 50%. Good. Hi-hats, I believe, are going to be right. You can see right here it says 0, 1, 14. And the crash is center. Good. So I I really didn't need to do much panning on this song. The song is pretty simplistic. Now I can already hear the congas are really loud, so I'm going to lower them a bit. The dynamic range on that is too far, so I'm going to lower that. I think the strings are supposed to be a little bit quieter. You can barely hear them in there, but I want them to be audible. I just don't want them to be too loud. So one thing about audio is that if you're panned hard left or hard right, just like the Super Nintendo, you're technically panning between left and right channels. Sound theory basically means, like, if you have left and right playing at the same time, then you've got dead center audio, right? Dead center. Now, if you're panning from dead center to the left, a good way of looking at it is your right channel and your left channel. Right channel or left channel? Yeah. Your right channel and left channel is going to go something like this, which means this is going to be quieter about half than it would be if both of them were together. Same thing happens on the right side. That makes mixing very hard. Basically, you have to keep in mind that if something like the hi-hats here is dead center, it's going to be twice as loud than it would be if it was dead panned right. Because I had to bring that crash back in, let's send that to the reverb. Again, we'll lower the reverb send to about there. Okay, now how I normally mix my drums, I have a bunch of presets in the Slate plugins because I want everything to stay consistent. So I'll load up Virtual Mix Rack. We're going to do the kick drum right now. And Virtual Mix Rack has a preset that I created in SO Chrono Trigger Kick. Now this tends to accentuate the low end a lot in this case, so I tend to lower that big time. Sounds good. Now it's control, click, and drag. Control, click, and drag just copies the instance. I'm going to change this. I have a punchy CT snare preset, but that's actually for the orchestral snare. What I normally do is I lower the shimmer on it, keep the thickness up, lower the high end, and then, yeah, all that looks good. Then I kind of play around. So I'm going to have to solo the snare here for a sec. I'm trying to get this punchy gated snare to be even more punchy. So turn the threshold down, ratio up. Now, the way you would normally compress something so that it actually hits harder and is more punchy is just do the extreme of the effect you're going for and then just dial back the mix. That's called side chaining. Okay, so that's got a nice snap to it. There we go. That looks like a good voice. Now, the reason why you do that is because the snap is going to let it cut through the mix a little bit. Turn it down a bit. You can already hear I kind of want to bring the high end up just a little bit. Or maybe take the thickness down. Good. Next thing I'm going to do is copy an instance of the strings. I got a preset for that too. Because the strings are super low quality on the Super Nintendo. What I normally do is take the high end out and then compensate with a little bit of the mid-high range. So you'll see that in this preset I got right here. High end is down. I'm compensating with the mid-high. The high end, I guess, is anything above 10K, maybe 8 or 9K. Mid-range here, I got just below 7.2. And just to bring a little bit of the crispness back, I have this Revival plugin where I crank it. It just causes a little bit of an artificial aliasing to it, but it doesn't sound bad. It's very musical. So I think strings are done. Let's drag this over to the pick bass. Now I got a pick bass. Typically on the fingered bass, I would use the preset called warm bass, warm present bass. But with the pick bass, I use either the aggressive fat bass or the fat bass. The reason is because it kind of accentuates the mid range instead of the low range. If you listen to the original bass sound, not a lot of low end in that, right? The idea here is to accentuate just above the low end, the compression going, then bring back the low end. Or sorry, when I say bring back, I mean lower the low end so that you don't want them too aggressive in the song. Let's turn that back and we'll just turn up low mid a bit. I can hear it's not compressing at all, so I'm just going to turn the compressor up. Now it still sounds like that bass is just going nuts. I can hear that the notes cut off in between the notes very quickly. And I think I might just have too much of a release on it. So if I click on the instrument, I go to the ADSR, maybe if I turn down the release, I'll get a better sound. Yeah, that might be too high. Let's change it to 25. And it just sustains too long, so let's turn the sustain down. I don't know, 3K? 3 seconds? That's better. I think it's still ringing too long, so let's turn that ADSR, the decay, down a bit. We'll go 2.5, so 2500. I think it was just ringing longer. This song doesn't have very long notes, so I can get away with using a shorter envelope. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm kind of compensating in between the compressor. I think that sounds really good. So let's do the organ now, and I think we're gonna call it after that. We'll drag the virtual mix rack over. Now this is gonna be harder. I don't really have a preset made for this, but what we can do is just lower the input, kind of neutralize everything, and basically we'll just we'll try to get something close to the original sound that we had. It sounds good, but I think the echo is too loud. I'm just going to double check in the game. We'll look at the volumes on it right here. Oh, they're the same volume. F10 DE. Interesting. So it goes da da da, but it's more like da da da. So the two da das are the same volume, but the last da is not. Whoops. Good. Now I still think the reverb could be a little bit shorter, so let's change that. The more I play around with the lengths, the more distorted it's going to sound. I think I'm going to check to see if I have a shorter one. So right now I'm using 1.8. I do have a shorter one, but I don't know if it's going to be much better. Let's try it. Okay. I thought we were done, but we have a few more we have to do. So what I want to do is maybe copy the snare one over to the congas. I kind of want the same kind of snap with the congas because I want it to cut through the mix, but I don't want it to be distracting. So I'm going to try not to over accentuate the bass, try to use the same sound. The beautiful thing about using analog plugins like this is that analog plugins have their own flavor to the sound. So even you can barely hear it. In fact, unless you're using some kind of phase out technique, you probably won't even know it's there. But basically what it does is it colors the sound ever so slightly and adds just a slight bit of distortion to it. The distortion you can't really hear all the time, again, unless you're phasing out with a difference trick. Basically phasing out with a difference trick is like taking two of the same track, one is inverted, and then you'll basically only be hearing the difference between the two tracks. You probably won't notice any of it, but that's okay, because even if it's there subtly, it's gonna color the sound just ever so slightly. I do want to keep the compressor here, and let's turn down, actually let's get rid of this. Get rid of the revival, and we'll just turn the mix all the way down. Okay, so I did add more of a snap to the percussion, but you can't hear it, so I'm going to turn the makeup up a bit. Nice. With the hi-hats, I don't do much. I mostly just use an overhead preset. So I go into the drum section and then I go use overheads, either tight or metal or just overheads in general. And as you can see, there's really not much going on. It kind of cuts out the middle range. Doesn't do anything to the low range because most cymbals won't have a low range. Although you don't want to cut out the low range too much on crash cymbals because then it flattens them out. It doesn't really give them that thickness to it. Now if I crank the lower range, you'll be able to hear exactly what it's doing. So that accentuated frequency, we're going to attenuate it. It just kind of pulls it back from the mix a bit, it sounds like. The high ticking part is still there, but the low end, which muddies up the lower mix, tends to disappear, which is good. And because crash and hi-hats are around the same frequency range, we can basically do the same thing on the crash cymbal. Now, at this point, I would consider it done. Well, what I normally would consider done is I would start to add, say, like a mastering plugin, like Ozone or something. In this case, I'm going to leave it off because I want to master it with my Synthetic Origins album. But we'll do a final listen right now, and then we'll just hear how it goes. After this, it's basically just tweaking. For most mixes, you'll want to listen through regular speakers or, in different scenarios, maybe in your car, maybe off your cell phone, just to make sure the mix works pretty well. The reason is because, like, they'll sound amazing in your headphones, but as soon as you play them on Mr. Joe Blow's regular speakers, they're going to sound like crap. This is just basic mixing 101. Again, I'm not teaching anybody how to use a DAW here. If you need more information about that, I would suggest looking it up. I'm gonna play the song fully and we'll just hear how it sounds, and hopefully it turned out well. If it did, great. If not, then I'll do some more work, but I'll consider this video done because there's really not much more to do here. Not bad. I think it turned out really well. I'm going to make a couple more changes and a couple more improvements, but I think it turned out really well. Well, I hope I educated you a little bit. I hope you enjoyed it. I know this was a super long video. I appreciate you sticking by me. This is basically what I do in my live streams. If you see that I'm live streaming, come along. I don't mind you joining in. If you have questions, I don't mind answering them. For the most part, though, I'm mostly doing this stuff for fun. But if you want to support me, I do have a Patreon. Right now it's paused, but it may come back. I'm not 100% sure. Keep an eye out. But thanks to all my patrons who are allowing me to be able to do stuff like this. Like, without them, I wouldn't have the kind of camera I have. Another high quality camera that I just purchased with the help of both of them and my family, my father. I wouldn't be able to afford paying for the Slate plugins every month like I do. It's just, they help me so much, and I just want to thank every one of them. Thank you for dropping by, and again, I hope you found this informative. But yeah, this is me, Matthew Valente, signing off. I gotta find a fucking less creepy exit.